All right, Bashers, in this video, we're doing RC Radios 101. How do you know if you should upgrade? In this video, we're going to go over some of the basics when it comes to radio choice. And we just have a small smattering of different radios here, but they apply to most of them as far as what they do and how you control them. There are real elaborate, expensive ones, and then there are the cheap ones that are the RTRs that come with the cars. And in this video, we'll talk about these and we'll see if you actually should upgrade or not. This should be fairly informative, and we really love doing the 101 series. Thanks for joining us. Check this out. All right, so let's talk about the basic controllers, and this is an SLT3, and this comes with a lot of the ARMA stuff. And these are decent radios, they really are, but they have a real basic control set, and what it comes down to is all of the functions on the radio, although it has quite a few. This one has, like most of the ARMA stuff, the Spectrum stuff now, this one comes with the cut down, so you can turn your power down to 50%, bump it up to 75, or take it all the way up to 100%, and that's built into these. And not only that, but it's also built into the SLT2s, and the 2s have them as well, although now they're coming out with this one with the orange button on the back, which basically has gyroscopic control over the RCs, and that's pretty cool. But at the same time, here's how you can tell whether or not you're going to need one. If you pick your RC up and get it out and you're ready to go, and you pick your radio up and it does what you want it to, and what I mean by that is if the steering's good, the throttle control is crisp, and everything works the way it needs to, it doesn't drift, you can set all your settings right here on the easy controls, then that radio is working for you and it shouldn't be a big problem. If you get into a race situation where you need to fine-tune things a little better for that finite control, that's something you might want to think about. But let's consider something else as well. This is what comes with the Traxxas RCs, and this one has actually got a lot more controls on it because this is for the TRX4, that's this one up here, and it has multiple transmissions in it, so you can lock the differentials, you can change the gear ratio, so change the speed of the vehicle and all that right on the controller, which is nice. But for most RCs, you don't need that, and you wind up with something that looks a bit like this. And these are decent controllers, they're quick, and they do multi-car, but in order to do that, you need this item in the back. And if you take a look at the difference here, this one has the sticker, and this one does not, because we put the upgrade module in this one. Now this makes it Bluetooth, okay? So with this module on the back, you're gonna need one of these. And what it is you take this and you log on and get their app from the App Store for the Traxxas control module, and then that allows you to get into your phone and set all your settings. You can pick the car you're gonna run. All of that's available inside of the app. And I'm kind of torn on that myself, because although it does work, I don't think it works all the time. I've gotten into situations where I was having trouble connecting to the car and all that kind of things. And the nice thing about these Traxxas radios is with that module in there, you can put multiple cars in there. This one radio will run the Sledge and the X-Max, for example, because you go into the app and you select the car you're going to run, and it sets all the settings up for how you have it tuned for that car, and away you go. Very nice. You'd have to go with something like this to get something similar, but this doesn't connect to, and this is the DX5C, this does not connect to your phone. All the settings are inside of it. Now the thing about that is there's a bunch of settings in here, and I'll try to give you a menu overview, but there's a lot of settings in here that odds are you're not going to know what they do right off the bat, and they can be a little bit confusing, and you have to learn how to use the menu and all that stuff. But if you need that finite control, in other words, let's say you're working on your steering throw, okay, if you use dual rates, and let me see, I got one of those right here. So this is one of the early ones. This is the STX2. This was arguably one of the worst radios they came out with in the Spectrum series, and the reason for that is the latency. And okay, so latency is the speed at which this communicates to the car and back. So turn it, there's a small delay, then the car turns, straighten it out, there's a small delay and the car straightens out. That's your latency. And that is how fast this can communicate. And this is a fairly slow communicating radio. However, if you're not running super fast and whatnot, these still can be usable. And we actually have several of these still connected to some of the cars because I like some of the settings on them. Now, on the back of this one, they've kind of done away with this on a lot of the radios now, but it has dual rates for the steering and the throttle side, which means, let's see if I can explain this. On the dual rates, and we do have another video that talks about this, but I'll brief it really quick. Dual rates are when you're wide open, your servo will throw this far. So the servo will move back and forth about this far. That's just an example. But as you turn the dual rate down, it narrows the field so it won't throw as far. So now instead of being able to throw the arm on the servo this far for your steering, same thing applies to the throttle control too. Full throttle, full brakes, less, but it works on an even basis. These dual rates do it at the same time. You can't just adjust one side, it adjusts it like this. So if you lose high speed, so let's say you take the dual rate on this and you turn the throttle rate down. In other words, you turn down the knob on the dual rates, it won't go as fast. It'll slow the car down because it doesn't reach full speed because it basically doesn't give it the full sweep. The problem is you also lose your brakes because it moves them together. Okay, that's the basics for dual rates. In these, you can adjust each side individually. You can pick the throw to the right and to the left for the steering, for all of it. And these run multiple channels. So the thing about that is these have a whole bunch of extra switches and stuff on them right up alongside here. They have a whole bunch. Now, this is just an example radio. I'm not touting this particular radio. This is an aftermarket basic radio. So in other words, this is something you would upgrade to. This isn't super expensive, but a lot of them have these controls, which makes it a lot better in that aspect. The problem is trying to figure out which ones do which, getting them to the right channel, adjusting the right side, getting the percentages where you want them so they control properly. These are more of an intermediate level radio because you do have to understand the throw and the percentages and all the stuff that goes with it. The manual does cover that, but that can also be a little bit difficult. Thank goodness we have YouTube, because you can get right on YouTube and someone will explain these to you, which makes them easier to operate. But at the same time, these are simple. And that's the beauty of the ones that come with them. If you get a decent one, okay, so let's say you get a car with this one, the SLT3, and you hate this radio. Okay, you could have many reasons for hating this radio. You might have frequency issues to where it cuts out on you. You might have range issues. You don't like the way it controls, the way it feels. You can't get the car to track properly. Whatever it is, and you just hate that radio, there are many options you can go with. And one that a lot of people go with is, where is it at? This one. So this is the Dumbo RC radio, and this one is 6 channels. So it's a pretty cool radio as far as that goes because the range is really good on these. It's really fast on the latency, which is the communication between the radio and the car. And here's the beauty of this. It still has the dual rates in there. It has the steering control in here. The thing about that is, let's look at this one again real quick, just for a second. So this one has the switch on it here that allows you to cut the power down to 50% throttle, bump it to 75, or go to 100% throttle, right? Okay, here's the thing about that. With this one, you just turn the dual rate down and you can select the speed you want to go, but you're not limited to 3 speeds. You can tune it down just a little to take the edge off if you're getting in a corner. You can turn it way down if you want to hand it to somebody else. And that works really well. Also, on the top here, if you get the G receiver that goes in the car, it has the gyro controls right here too, which is also excellent. Also, besides that, if you go to the link connector, now this is the actual app that you run with the Traxxas radios, and this will give you a lot of controls inside as well. And as you add your cars, you can save them in the app itself, and it does give you control over the cars, but you do have to pay for that link module separately. And when I bought mine, it was like $35, so it wasn't really all that expensive to give me multi-car setup and all that stuff. It was really affordable, But on the radio itself, it has very limited controls. This is the wrong one to grab because this is the basic one here. So it has very limited controls. If you take a look on the back, there's literally nothing back there. You have 2 knobs on the front and you have 2 buttons on the top, and that's your lot. That's what you get with these. And in my opinion, that's too basic, but I've never had a problem with one running the car itself. As far as that goes, if you pick the radio up, and I mentioned this earlier, if you pick the radio up, you can forget the radios in your hand and the car does what you want it to. You have a good radio for that if it works for you. Even this one. This is the STX2, right? This is the one we talked about earlier. And this has a real latency problem. Tina likes hers because she doesn't care that much about the latency. She's not trying to get super high performance out of her car. This still allows her to set it up the way she wants it to. And the beauty of this one is, with this, with the dual rates in there, she can set her speed. This one still has the cut down. So it still has the 50, 75, or 100 on it, but she doesn't really use that because you just turn down the dual rate a little bit and set your speed accordingly. And she loves that about it. It's comfortable in her hand and she has no issues with it whatsoever. So hers still have these radios on them. I've offered to swap them out and she just keeps saying nope, she likes her radios. And there's nothing wrong with that. If this stock radio works for you, great. But there are certain applications where you're going to need a little better performance out of your radio. High speed is one of them for sure. If you have extra things that you need to run, like a gyroscopic unit that's in there, that's gyro, AVC, whatever they want to call it, you have to be able to control that. And so the radio needs to support that. So if you're going to run something to help level your car out, and you know, I've heard people say that having a gyro is cheating or whatever. You don't use them during racing anyway, but if it helps you have fun with your car, by all means, run one. But if you are going to run a gyro, I always tell everybody this, if you are going to run a gyro, make sure you turn it off before you leave the ground on a ramp or anything, or you'll have tragic results because it does cause the car to waggle in the air and it makes landing unpredictable. Still, at the same time, when you get into a higher end radio like this one, it does give you all those controls and you can set them up independently. An example is, and of course, same thing, this is a Spectrum radio as an example. It applies to the other ones as well. Most of them you can map where you want things to sit on the radio. So if you want to adjust your steering here, you want to adjust your speed here, whatever you want to play with, you can generally set on whichever switch you want it to be on. So you can tune it really quickly in the field. That's all up in the setup. These menus can be confusing, but with some patience, you can definitely get there. All right, that being said, let's get you a couple of examples as to what the menus look like, how the dual rates work, and such. So we're going to go into the main studio, and we're going to give you some example work. Here it comes. Okay, for this demonstration, we've got Tina's Creighton sitting on the bench, and it has the street tires on it. And these, we actually built those on some wheels to make them pretty tough for cornering, but that's not what this is about. So we've got the STX2, that's this one, and we're going to show you what the dual rates do as far as when you turn these up and down. The same thing goes for the steering. It takes them down evenly, and this demonstration should show you how that works. Then we'll show you something about the more high-end radios, and that will help you understand the difference between simple on-site setup where you can just adjust something versus something you have to get into the menu for. Here we go. First, we're going to turn on the radio. There we go. Let's turn on the car. Excellent. So, with it set, these are all jacked up now. So, as far as the dual rates are turned all the way up, and the steering is really fast, but it goes too far. So you can hear the servo binding. So it's pushing too hard on the servo, so you turn the dual rate down for the steering side. Let's turn it all the way off. Now look what happens. It barely moves. So as you hold that all the way to the right, you can turn this up. There we go. And you see how you can adjust it. That's for both directions. So there's maxed out. So now it turned tight both ways, but it won't overpower everything because it stops in the right place. That's where the dual rate comes into play here. Now let's turn the dual rate all the way down on the throttle. It's gonna work, but it's not gonna go very fast. And this is at 100%, so let's keep it right there. This is only a 3S battery, so that's fine. With the BLX system, you can go 3S, 4S, or 6S. So here we go. Okay. Now we're gonna turn it up on this. And see how tough the brakes are on that? That's just full brakes. But if you turn this down, see how that mellowed out the brakes? So this does basically the same thing as this. So now we're at 50%. It's the same difference on that, but now we can turn this down even more. Turn this all the way down on 50%. That's maxed out. And we can dial this up. And that gives you a little more finite control over your power settings. All right, that behind us, let's go ahead and look at the differences between what would be a stock radio, and we are still going to use the STX2, but most of the radios that come with the RCs are much the same way. They may have differences in controls, but the setup is usually pretty simple, and it's right on the radio itself. We're going to show you what the menu looks like in one of these higher end radios, so you can decide whether that's right for you or not. Okay, so here we go. This is the Rugged and this is the STX2, and to get a much closer look at this one has your reversing for your servos. So for the steering side, you can switch this if the wheels are turning the wrong direction. You can go ahead and switch this one. This one's the same thing with the throttle. If you're running the wrong direction, pull the trigger and it goes the wrong way. Start with flipping this switch and make sure everything's working well. That's right on the radio. Also down here at the bottom, you still have your ability to cut your throttle down just really quickly. So if you're going to let a buddy run your car, he doesn't have any experience, you can kick it down to 50%, he can putter around with it. But the cool thing about these is, with this turned up and you're on, let's say you're on the racetrack, you can dial your throttle down a little bit so that it doesn't overpower specific corners. It's right here on the radio to set your steering throw and all that. It's right up top where you can get at it. The downside is you can bump those, and that can change your settings in the middle of a race or what have you. But at the same time, if you're racing, odds are you're not going to run this anyway. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. And like I say, this is the Rugged, and this is a pretty decent radio. So what we're going to do here is power it on, and that's right here. Here we go. Let it power up. And now you have your menu section. And the nice thing about this is it shows you all of your settings right here. And for each one of these, you can set an adjustment on these triggers here to adjust these on the fly, which is kind of nice, but you do have to set these up. Now, the deal about that is, with this particular radio, and they're not all the same, but with this particular radio, you have all of your controls here for the menu. It's not a touch screen. So in order to roll down the menu, you have to slide your thumb down this or up this, because it is a touchscreen situation. So you can slide it down and slide it up and that kind of thing. Okay, so that's what OK did just off of the main screen, and that brought this menu screen up. And in this menu screen, it shows you all the different things that you can set in here. Model select, model name, travel for your servos and all that stuff, your sub trim, reversing, speed rates, exponential, timer, wait for it. Here we go. That's how you bind it right there. It's got mixing for channel mixing. It's got AVC control, and of course that's your gyro. Trim setup, auxiliary assign, telemetry, settings, and utilities. Okay, so you can get out of the menu by hitting back, and that takes you back up to the one that you're set up for. So at this moment, this particular radio is set up to run the MT10, and that's been set up to run that car. But still, let's say, just for example, Let's drop into a menu and we'll select a model. There we go. This one has the Infraction, the MT10, the Typhon 3, that's the 3S Typhon, the Fire Teams on this one, the Techno, and the 4S Creighton. Those are all in this radio. So this one does allow you to run multiple cars by simply selecting the car. So let's go down to the Fire Team, like that. Click on OK. And now it's set up for the Fire Team. And all the settings that's necessary for that particular car are all showing right here. So where your trims are and that kind of thing. To adjust the trims, you have to get into the menu, or you have to assign to these where you want to put them so that you can adjust things. Plus there are different triggers that you can use here. There's a lot involved in one of those, but once you set them up, they are a lot of help to what you're going to do. And if it's right for you, I highly recommend getting one. But if you don't need all of that, and this still drives your car just fine, I don't see any reason to upgrade unless it's necessary. All right, so there's the demonstration on those, and you know, some of them are really simple, and it's not about brand. I'm not talking about brand. If you find a brand of radio you like, great, it's your hobby, do it the way you want to. We have a lot of Spectrum stuff here. We have a lot of Traxxas stuff here. We've got Red Cat Racing. This one has a dual rate for the steering on it. We've got Team Associated. It also has dual rates on it. So there's a lot of things that are really a bonus when it comes to the stock radios. Maybe you don't have the dual rates on the throttle on this one, but it does have one for the steering right there. And that does work to help set the endpoints for your steering and whatnot. And that does work, and it's really nice. These can be confusing right off the bat, but if you find yourself needing one, definitely get one. And it's not this. Keep in mind, it doesn't have anything to do with that particular radio. It has to do with whether you want a multifunction radio or you just want one to go out and podunk around with. If you need more range, then you're going to want to look into one that I get on YouTube and do my searching, and they usually show you excuse me, which ones actually have the better range to them. A lot of these work anyway, and it's a matter of what you need for the hobby that you enjoy. So I hope this was helpful. We never tell you what you have to get. We simply tell you what works for us, and we try and share the knowledge. So if you haven't already, don't forget to bash that like button and help our content spread. You know, this kind of stuff, it seems really base or simple to the people that have been in the hobby for a while, but if you're brand new, which is what our channel is geared toward, if you're new, this can seem daunting, especially when you fire up a menu in something like this and you're not ready for it. It can be really a killer for something like this, because what it comes down to is you fire up a stock radio, you set your steering trim, and you go play. That is as simple as it gets. But when you fire one of these up and you sync it to a car and you don't know how to put the settings in correctly, this isn't going to function well until you tune it to the car, and that can take time. It can take the zap out of your car if you just don't have it set up correctly, and that's required with the higher end radios. You need to get them set up, you need to set your endpoints, you need to set everything, and that's not, like I say, not Spectrum necessarily, it's any of the high-end radios. You'll have all those options you'll have to set up. If you're new to the hobby and your radio is working for you, I keep a lot of stock radios on my cars because they do function well with them. If you have anything you'd like to add to this video, please feel free to get down in the comments below and help others along the way. For AJ Jam Studios, I'm AJ saying, keep bashing.